Are we ready to go?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. 50 and Coping is all about finding a way to cope in all situations. And sadly, at our age, Lee and I, basically we find ourselves in a place where we're losing people.
Yeah.
And this causes us and all of you out there will feel grief at some point. The psychological definition of grief is the anguish experienced after significant loss, usually the death of a beloved person. Grief often includes psychological distress, separation anxiety, confusion, yearning, obsessive dwelling on the past, and apprehension about the future. Mm-hmm. So basically, when somebody leaves this plane and leaves you behind, all of a sudden you're lost.
Yep.
Because I suppose if it's a parent, these people have guided you and always been there for you, and then there is no one. Whoever you have around you, whoever is the most supportive to you, is most likely, in a lot of cases, to be a parent.
Yep.
So even if you're married, you have kids and all of that, it's a different bond.
Yep.
So we wanted to look at grief and how it's affected us, and also the differing types of grief. You know, it's not just about human beings, it's about loss, it's about pets, it's about all kinds of things.
Yeah.
And I know that, you know, sadly, you are the person who have lost somebody most recently. Mm-hmm. So do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I guess. Yeah. I lost both my parents now, and my dad being in 2015, my mum January 2021, and I pause there because it still affects me when I think about it.
Still hurts.
And I guess always will in some shape or form. Not as much as it did, I have to say. It has got easier. I don't get so affected by it now, but there's still times when I fall apart completely. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I guess yeah, the three significant people I've lost was my dad, and then I guess the sort of the surprising one was my cousin. My cousin Sally should have been the sort of next matriarch in the family after my mum passed away, and she was always more of an auntie, quite a bit older than me, but more of an auntie than a cousin.
Yeah.
But she was always one of my family members that would look after me and looked out for me. She helped me through my divorce and all of the sort of dark times. Mm. But sadly, she got cancer and she passed away before my mum did, and that was another story maybe for another time, of dealing with my mum and her early start of dementia, and whether we spoke to her about whether Sally had passed away or not, and all of that sort of stuff. So yeah, it's first experience of death was my dad. Completely unexpected,
right? And
that was the first thing that really hit me. He, as we know and we spoke about previously, suffered with bipolar disorder, was in and out of mental institutions my whole life and most of his life.
Yep.
He went in, having had one of his episodes, went into a psychiatric unit. Didn't want anyone to see him because he never really did in those scenarios. And as we got older, we kind of respected that, so we didn't go and see him. Hadn't seen him for 5 weeks. Went out for a big night out with Nikki. Got home very, very late, or very, very early, I guess, in the morning. Was sleeping in, then had a phone call from the unit to say, your dad's on his way to Watford General. You kind of need to get there as soon as you can. Mm-hmm. Didn't really say much more than that. He had somehow choked on his breakfast in a healthcare environment, which I've never really fully understood.
Yep.
And died. And that was it. So by the time I got to hospital, he died.
He'd already gone?
Which I realised because I turned up and said, I'm here to see Peter Robinson, and they went, okay, yes, would you like to just come to this side room, Mr. Robinson? At which point,
and then you knew straight away.
I realised, okay.
Because they're shuffling you into the death room.
Yeah, rather than, which bay is he in?
Yeah.
And that was that. So that was hard, because obviously no preparation at all.
No.
Hadn't seen him for 5 weeks, and then instantly felt guilty for not having been to see him for 5 weeks. Mm. Although that was for,
his own wishes.
Yeah.
Does that manifest as guilt? That you didn't get to see him before he died? Or is it just because there's no closure?
A bit of both, really, I suppose. A bit of both. I mean, I was given the opportunity to see him. They said, would you like to see him? But I know they'd been trying to revive him for quite some time.
Right,
so they'd been,
beating on him.
All sorts of stuff and wires, and I'm not great with hospital stuff generally. So I thought I'd rather keep the memories I've got of him rather than having a memory of seeing him.
Okay.
Not that.
So that was 2015.
Yeah.
And can you say that the grief has diminished?
Yeah, but possibly because it's been overtaken by the grief of the other two, I guess, to some degree. I certainly, it's less painful thinking about my dad's passing than it is about my mum's passing.
Yep.
Presumably because it's longer ago.
Yep.
I find it much easier to think of the good stuff with my dad and take the positives of my life that I've sort of gained from him. I see that a lot more than I do from my mum at this point.
We've never had a conversation about your dad that was in a negative light. So you've never leaned on the fact that he was bipolar and he got sexy. You talk about that matter of factly.
Yeah.
But the things you talk about are your memories of him in a workshop and working and fixing and do all that stuff, which is why you now find yourself in that position.
Absolutely, yeah. And that's why I volunteered to come and help you on a Sunday morning at Metal Machine, because it just reminds me of him. When I walk into that workshop and I smell the metal shavings and the Swarfiga and it smells like a workshop.
It does.
It reminds me of my dad coming home from work.
Cool.
Which was one of the highlights of my day when I was a kid.
Okay, so I mean, looking at your mother and your aunt, obviously there was preparation for their passing. If in a way.
Yeah, in both cases, yes, but in different ways. So Sally had cancer.
Yeah.
We knew she was given 6 to 9 months to live, terminal cancer diagnosis, and lasted for about 15 months, thanks to, we hope, and thanks to some of the nutrition advice that Nikki gave her and her decision not to go with any treatment, actually, which was interesting. She was given the option of various treatments to help, which would never cure it.
But slow it down.
But not even that.
No?
She got the impression it was more to help the health service do research, and she said, I don't want to spend 3 out of 4 weeks of the rest of whatever time I've got left feeling like shit. So decided to, which was really inspirational, I thought. Decided, like, I've got a bucket list of stuff I want to do, which is all really basic stuff. Going to the seaside, having whatever, and do that instead of suffering as a result of the treatment, which is
that puts in mind your mate Dave, who we talked about the cancer with. He is getting treatment, but what I mean by that is he's decided to make the whole thing as positive as he can, by respecting the fact he has a disease, but also doing the things he wants to do, going to football, carrying on working, doing what he needs to do to survive, if you like.
And like you said, living well with that condition, and that's
excuse me. It's a funny thing that we are looking at people's decisions to do what they want rather than get treatment, when our natural human reaction is, well, why wouldn't you get treatment? It might help. There might be, and it's like, if it's not going to help, why the hell would you do that? And I get it that the cancer people need to do research and all that, but this is a living, breathing human being who has people who love her, and and I think that's a bit disrespectful to ask that of her, really.
Yeah, of course. In fact, the decision itself caused quite a bit of disruption in the family. Both of her daughters wanted her to have the treatment because they thought it might make her last a bit longer. Well,
that's selfish, isn't it?
Yeah, and that's the problem that she couldn't get through to them. It's like, well, it's still my life, and I want that, whatever it is, 6 months, 15 months, whatever it is, to be as full of joy and happiness and good things as possible. And that wouldn't have happened if she was spending a lot of time in hospital, travelling to and from hospital, recovering from treatment and all that stuff. So
that would have detracted from her everyday life. It's good. It's good that people are strong enough to make those decisions, but it's not good when family members think that they have enough influence to change that decision. Yeah. Because you're going to make the best decision for you at that time. But you see, everyone always thinks they know better. Yeah, that's true. That's true. So to sort of answer the question about the preparation with Sally, I had the chance to say goodbye and consciously chose when that would be. Yep. So how did that work?
We knew she was declining. She was at home by her choice rather than being in hospital. She was bedridden, basically, sleeping a lot. So we knew that the end was coming. So I went to see her, spent an evening with her, sitting on the bed, chatting about all sorts of stuff, football and life and all of the good stuff and all the memories. And it was just a really nice evening. Didn't talk about the cancer, didn't talk about death, didn't talk about anything at all.
Just found some middle ground with you.
And then got to the point where she's like a 2-hour journey away, and I had to get home. And I said, right, I'm going to have to say goodbye. And obviously, you say that, and you think, Christ, this is it. This is properly goodbye. And hugged her, and we both knew, kind of thing, I guess,
that would be the last time.
But still unspoken.
Yeah.
So had a hug, and difficult to leave the room, obviously. Thinking about that now, I've not really dwelled on that, I must admit, but thinking about it now, I think we're both trying to be strong for each other, and both going, okay, see you soon, kind of thing, which is, we did say, okay, yeah, see ya, sort of thing.
Yeah. Well,
and then left and then got in the car.
You can feel the unspoken.
Yeah.
You can see that, she knows what's coming, you know what's coming.
Yeah.
And the good thing is it wasn't a negative experience either, it was positive.
No, it wasn't. And she lasted for another 2 weeks after that, and her daughter, so my, whatever they, second cousin, contacted me and said, Mum's still, she's still around there, she still has sort of wakeful moments, did you want to come back and see her again? And she asked me that 2 or 3 times in the ongoing 2 weeks. And every time I said, no, I think I'm all right. I think I'm content that I've said my goodbyes. And I didn't want to see her looking any worse either, because she didn't look particularly bad when I saw her, and didn't want that image in my head. So that was okay. My mum was slightly different in that fairly sort of horrendous start to the end, that she went into hospital over Christmas in 2021,
during
that period.
COVID.
During the whole lockdown stuff. Was told by the hospital she's just got a chest infection, as she was in a care home at the time. I probably should specify that, I suppose. Got taken in, was told she had a chest infection. So you get that news and go, okay, she's 92, there's every chance any time she goes into hospital she might not come out. Just a chest infection. We just need to arrange transport to get her back to the home. And this was, I can't remember the precise dates, I think it was the 26th, 27th of December 2020. So there was a bank holiday, which meant that the transport issue couldn't be sorted out straight away, because the following day was a bank holiday and it was going to be a bit of a pain. So the bank holiday happened, and in the middle of all that, trying to get hold of anyone in the hospital was just a nightmare. The phone just rang and rang and rang, no one answered it. So I was trying to find out, the care home were trying to find out. And the care home said, she's due to come home, but we haven't heard. So I rang them. This is now 24 hours later. Is she, have you heard, is she coming back? Don't know, haven't heard, can't get hold of the hospital. Rang the hospital, got through and said, it's definitely Robinson's son. Just wondered, when she's coming home. And the guy said, coming home? Who told you that? Whatever gave you that idea? And I went, what? He went, we're just deciding whether we're going to withdraw treatment.
So this industry professional who's supposed to have a bedside manner just said that?
Yeah.
Nice.
And obviously blew me away completely, because
you weren't expecting that in any way?
No, not at all. No. And ultimately, she wasn't coming out. No. Because of, again, all of the restrictions, because of COVID. I could go and see her for a limited amount of time per day, only once per day, all this stuff. So I'd go and see her, and she lasted 3 or 4 days, and she passed away on the 2nd. About an hour and a half after I'd left her, which again was a bit of a frustration, but I didn't feel bad about it. But I had the option of staying. Needed to go home and have something to eat, and I said to the nurse, should I come back later, or what? What do you think? Not, trying to put the responsibility on her. And she sort of said, well, she's warm, I think she's strong, and she always was an absolute, she was so strong physically. I think, I don't think you need to come back tonight. She said, you've been here a long time. Go home, get some rest, and come back in the morning. I got home and an hour later I had a phone call to say she's passed away. So but so I don't feel. I mean, she was unconscious the whole time, the whole of the time that I was there. Really.
Yep.
When I first went in the first day, she was really agitated and not in a great place. But after that first bit, she wasn't. Whether she was aware I was there or not, who knows? I'd like to think she knew I was there. But
yeah, I think she probably did.
So didn't feel that I kind of missed the end and feel bad about that. Felt that I did my bit, Do
you think you were more conscious of endings because of your dad as well?
Yeah, probably. Yeah, and because of going through the stuff with Sally, I suppose. I think because of having those two very different previous experiences, this was somewhere between the two. It wasn't sudden. There was a bit of prep. But
I mean, the other thing is though, you often learn from your perceived mistakes.
Yeah.
So you see something as something you could have changed. The fact of the matter is, you couldn't really have changed that situation.
Yeah, and I guess that's the thing, I suppose, because I knew I'd been through the thing with my dad, and I guess thought, well, there's no point in feeling guilty, and I suppose that's why I didn't feel the guilt towards Mum. I knew I'd been to see her.
Well, you've been present, and what you missed was, the last hour.
Yeah, and I think more so I'd been present in her time during the care home in the previous 2 and a bit years, whatever that was, of seeing her 3 or 4 times a week, and that period of time really rebuilt a bond between my mum, and we sort of lost our way a little bit. She was getting old and infirm, and I was dealing with divorce and all of that stuff.
Yep.
But that gave a chance. They say about was it once an adult, twice a child, and I did become. Or was it the other way around? I became the carer for my mum.
Yep.
And loved every minute of it. Having that chance to rebond with her and look after her.
Yep. Feels like payback.
40 years later, then she sort of stopped directly looking after me, although obviously that never really stops. Was just an honour and a privilege, and I absolutely loved it.
That's really good. That's really good because a lot of people see this as a burden because they forget where they come from.
Yeah.
Which I can't talk about. I didn't do that.
I think I had got to that point prior to her being in the home. I got frustrated with her not being able to use the TV remote, and the skybox has gone off, and all of that stuff.
Yeah.
I did, and I got coached out of that by Nikki. Really, she said, give her a bit of credit, and a lot of my approach to my mum changed because of those conversations. To say, she's old, she's infirm, she is.
I think also you have residual memory of your mum being your mum, right?
Yeah.
So by that I mean you remember her doing what she did, being strong, sorting everyone out, making sure everyone in the gaps where your father wasn't there running that show.
Yeah, totally.
As well.
Totally.
So you remember that, and then you see this older, infirmer woman who you don't necessarily recognise fully as your mother, but definitely is. And then you find yourself in a position where you're questioning, who is this? What do I do? Because also there's no bloody handbook, right? There's no handbook for being a parent. Yeah. And there sure as shit isn't a handbook about dealing with your parents getting older.
No.
My dad's 86. Yeah. He has 2 types of cancer, but actually, as of yesterday, he's still in full remission. Fantastic. So that's amazing. Yeah. It should be said that my mother died. I think she died when I was 27. I think so. I'm not good with dates and times. Yeah. But I was an adult. I wasn't a very well functioning adult at that time. Anyway, a lot of people try to attribute my drug abuse to my mother dying, but it's bullshit.
It's a reaction sort of.
Yeah, but it's bullshit. That's not what caused me to do that. Did it
help though? Did you?
Did what help?
The drugs. Did it help to cause a distraction from dealing with it? I'm not saying you dove into it because of it, but
it masked everything, which is why I took. So also, I'm an addict, as we're finding with all different kinds of things like food and all of that. Yeah. But she basically pulled us into a room when we were living in Wells in Somerset. So I was 8, and said to us that she had multiple sclerosis. For those that don't know, multiple sclerosis is basically a disease where you are trapped inside your own body, because your body fails but your mind doesn't. It's it's a terrible thing to have to be part of, and there are people who are close to us who are dealing with the same thing. So I'm not going to labour details. What happened was after that, it's really odd. 1 minute she had to wear an eye patch. The other was her left leg didn't work and properly, so she had to stay in the house, couldn't do things. Then 2 weeks later she'd be up, she'd be driving, she'd be fine, everything would be nice. So we're thinking, what is going on? But we knew where this would end, and she tried these diets where she had to make her own bread and eat these other things, which I think a lot of that was a placebo. I think a lot of it was focus on something else. My father, who basically at the time had gone from chaplain of Wells Cathedral School to chaplain of Haileybury, where I was, and then we left Haileybury. He went to Westminster School and basically became, a minor canon of Westminster Abbey, an important man. He was arguably one of the top chaplains in the country. But still was there, present, conscious, and looked after my mother. And if you have a situation where the body cannot do anything for itself, you understand the connotations of that. Luckily, David Summerscale was the headmaster of Westminster School at that time, and he was friends with my father and just said to my dad, look, you've got to do what you've got to do, but look after your wife. So then they moved, after he retired, they moved to a place called Hadley, which is near Petworth, I think, in Sussex. And then they were there, and then we had like this messed up Christmas dinner where I think we all kind of knew what was coming, and me and my two sisters, my dad and my mum was there. She couldn't speak, but she was there. And I remember my sister made a goose, and I threw my toys out of the pram because it was a goose at Christmas, and I wanted this Christmas to be the most normal Christmas because it couldn't be. So I stopped off being a git. And then she went to, I think it was Ipswich Hospital for some reason. She went. They moved around a lot, and she ended up in Ipswich Hospital because she could no longer eat and swallow. So they were going to put a thing called a peg in her stomach, which means they could feed her through that. And it's similar. I had a conversation with her, i.e., pretty one way, but she could signal, and you knew what was happening. And then I realised how small she looked in that bed, because your mother's larger than life. Right? She's the guiding light of all things. If you're lucky enough to have that relationship, which I did, I think. I don't really remember. But I knew, like you knew about your cousin, I knew she wasn't leaving that bed. I knew that. I probably remembered the details wrong, but that's how I feel now about it. So I did what I always did, which was look for escapism. And escapism then was I phoned the local tattoo shop. Now the guy knew who I was because I'd run a tattoo convention for the bikers in Slough, and it was a big old deal. And I phoned him and I said, "Have you got any time? I really need to be tattooed, and I'm here now." And he obviously realised that I was in some kind of state. And he said, "Let me see if my customer can rearrange, and then but come over." He said, "Have you got transport?" And I had my bike. So I rode to the shop, which was 8 minutes away, probably did it in 3, and got off the motorcycle, and I saw the guy pulling the shutters on the shop down, and I'm like, and he said, yeah, I've got rid of everyone. My customer's fine, it's a mate. The other two, they're not working today, so we can just do that. And he said, "Are you okay?" And I said, "I can't talk about what's happening apart from my mother's dying in hospital. I need you to tattoo me." And he went, "Okay, what do you want?" And I said, "I want chaos on the inside of my arm." So on the inside of my bicep here is written chaos. I had mayhem, which looks like Matt Penn put on afterwards. And now I'm old, I have bingo wings, so it just looks like... The point being is this man who knew who I was but didn't know me, shut his shop, tattooed me for... I've got a frog in my throat. Tattooed me for a while, and then afterwards said, "Have you eaten?" And I'm like, "No." And he said, because I wasn't high. I remember that. So I was present. And I felt pain, like having your armpit fucking tattooed. It's painful.
Yeah, I can imagine.
And it was a conscious decision to have that, because that was the way I could cope. If I didn't feel anything other than the pain, then I'd be fine, obviously.
Why chaos? Just because that's where your brain was?
That's where I was.
Yeah.
And also my life was chaos.
Yeah.
And obviously the other side being mayhem, you know, the whole... That's how I am. My whole brain is chaotic.
Yeah.
And, you know, I knew then. And then obviously she died.
Did you see her again, or was that?
No, that was it. She died that day.
That day. Okay.
My father... I don't remember details. It's really odd. But my father was grieving for his partner for so long, and you know, to the point where he's howling in his sleep. I hope he doesn't mind me mentioning that. But he, you know, the grief was tangible for him, and I didn't feel anything for such a long time.
Yeah.
Right. I think we've talked about this before, but you know the film Marley and Me.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I'm laughing, but it's not funny. Yeah.
Yeah. So I lost a friend of mine about a year after my mother died.
Yeah.
And I'm watching this nice film about a dog.
Yeah.
Right? And my dog sat there, you know, with me, Skylar, at the time, and we're watching this film. And at the end, you know, this dog that's been the soul life dies.
Yeah.
And I fucking lost it.
Yeah.
I was in floods of tears. I was, you know, all the way gone, like inconsolable.
Yeah.
Because I think, and it was a long time after, you know, it wasn't that, but with the death of my friend, who basically, I used to take drugs with, we used to take opium together, which is, you know, that's not really a great bond. But he, you know, neither of us were junkies at that time, but smoking opium's a fantastic thing if it wasn't so damaging. So, you know, all of that, and it hit me like a ton of bricks.
Yeah.
And I'm not a crier. I'm not one to show emotion overly.
Yeah.
But I just fell apart. And I remember thinking, Jesus Christ, I didn't even honour my mother by having the decency to look at it. And then started self-beating, what do you call it, when you beat yourself up, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
So after that incident, then I realised that I'd not really looked at it. The funeral, her funeral was a bit traumatic as well. We were all stood, so there was the church service, which was really nice. My dad gave a brilliant speech, which I still have a copy of, because he was a great orator. You know, he still is.
Yeah.
So I'm sitting in a church with all these strangers who know me.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, then I'm starting to think, okay, I wasn't as tattooed as I am now, but I was still pretty tattooed. I was horrendously overweight, and I looked like shit. At that time, I was drinking more than I was taking drugs, but the cocaine just fueled the drinking. But I was clean that day.
When you say look like shit, because of the grief, or just because of your life in general?
Just because of my life in general. I was, you know, it was, you know, if it's one of those moments where you would look at someone and go, "Are you wearing a frog suit, or are you genuinely that ugly?" Do you know what I mean? That's what someone would have said to me. That's for you, Samuel.
I'm not not sure I'd have been brave enough to say that to you, but okay, I'll take your word for it.
Well, nobody did. And my grandmother, who I just don't think we got on. I don't think she came up to me. The only thing she said to me that whole day was, "Why on earth would you wear thumb rings? What do you need a ring on your thumb for?" And I'm like, what? And I remember going to the bar and I ordered a double Jack Daniels and Coke, and I bought my sister a gin and tonic. And then my dad came over. I said, "Do you want a drink?" And he went, "Yeah, yeah." And then, so we all just had a drink, and there was a quiet moment, which I remember. And then my dad said, "I need you to give a speech." And I'm like, "What are you talking about? I can't speak." And then I did. And that, I think that in the moment was the most healing thing.
Yeah.
Because there was a situation, I got hit in the face with a monkey wrench, and it smashed me backwards. And my ear was down here, my nose was over there, there's a big hole in my nose still, there's no cartilage at the top of my nose, you stick your finger in it, which is very attractive. And I gave this speech about how, even though she couldn't talk much, even though she couldn't, you know, react to life, I moved home very briefly while I was that damaged. And she didn't say anything. She didn't do anything. All of the do-gooders. You imagine my dad being a chaplain and a vicar and a priest vicar of the abbey. You know, there's all the do-gooders in the world. You know, all her friends going, "Oh, I must come round and talk to him." She was just like, "Nah, you leave him alone," because she knew that the only person I would talk to was her.
Yeah.
And then it would, all of my angst, all of my fear, because when you get smashed up, you have fear.
Yeah.
And also, you know, that even that situation is a bit of a grief situation. You grieve for who you were before you found this fear. And then she stopped one day and looked at me and she actually said, "Go on." And I'm like, "What?" And then I just told her everything that happened, how I was feeling, what I was doing, why I was so messed up by the whole thing. Because bearing in mind, I've been like a 19-year-old, I'm fucking God, right? No one can touch me, no one can kill me. And if someone hit me in the face with a fucking great spanner and that knocked me backwards. Obviously, I'm still indestructible. Obviously, apart from I've got bad hips, you know, but that's all right. And chicken legs, but that's okay. But yeah, and then that one moment was so cleansing. The next day, I got up, moved back to my house, went back to work. And everyone's like, "What are you doing here?" I'm like, "I'm good." Don't fucking look at it. But you know, she was the one who knew what was right for me because she was my mother. Yeah. Even though there was nothing said. Yeah. And I remember saying that, and I remember basking in the glory of that. Having one person who knows you so well, they don't even need to say anything, they just wait. Yeah. Because the other thing I didn't mention was I didn't talk after I got home. I didn't talk to anyone. I didn't say anything. I was completely insular. Yeah. And some people say that trauma is where a lot of my problems arose. So, you know, it's not the normal, "Oh, well, I was taking painkillers, got addicted." No, bollocks, I didn't do that. But, you know, that trauma in itself, I still have flashes of me sitting on the pavement with literally a pool of my blood around me. I lost 4.5 pints of blood that night, and you only have 8 in your body. And there was some girl was holding me up, and I kept asking her the time. And then in anxiety dreams, or you know, so that's what flashes into my head. And the other thing that flashes into my head is when I crashed my motorcycle and broke my leg, and it turned the wrong way. Yeah. So obviously, those two traumatic things are still in my head.
That's interesting, because a long time ago, when we started talking about stuff, you said to me, "Well, I didn't have any trauma."
Yeah.
And you've obviously come to realise that you have had.
I've had quite a lot of trauma. I'm noticing now, obviously, you know, I'm walking down a road where I have to examine my behaviour to be true to these topics. Yeah. We will look at traumas. Yeah. In another way. I do want to say as well, it's not just when you lose humans.
No, my God, no.
Right. So Skylar, who was half bull mastiff, half Rottweiler, was my best friend when I had the kidney disease and all of that, and I was on my own. Yep. All I had was an empty flat and a dog. Somehow I always managed to have dog food, but not stuff for myself. Yep. When Sky died, right, basically got cancer, and then we had insurance, which please, if you've got a dog, get insurance, because however rich you are, you can't afford it. And she went through treatment and we reacted really well. But I made a pact with myself that she would tell me when it was time. And there was one day she got up and then completely lost control of her legs and flopped down on the floor and was looking at me in panic, saying, I can't function. So that day we had to take her and have her put down. The sad thing is there was this, just for description, not for any other reason, there was a Polish gentleman who was a vet. Yeah. And he couldn't get the needle to go in where it needed to be. He wasn't strong enough to hold the dog and all that. And he said, "If I hold the dog, can you inject her?" And I'm like, "You want me to what?" Okay. But instead, set the scene. My wife is in tears. Yep. My son, we've had to send him out to the receptionist, who's an old alcoholic, but he was a nice guy, right? I'm in floods. I don't mind admitting, I'm in floods of fucking tears. This dog was with me through all of my shit, right? Kept me warm in winter. I had no heating in this flat on the top floor in Carradine Court in Seal Farm. It's no longer there. They've knocked it down. That's how bad it was. And she would come in and either lie across me or get under the duvet to stay warm. So she kept me warm.
Yep.
And I'll say this now. I had full-on kidney disease, right? I was fucked. I was even at one point told I was going to die,
Yep.
right? And this dog knew what to do. And you can't tell me that that's not part of things.
Yep. Yep.
When she died, I was beside myself. I functioned. And then people around me are going, I don't know what your fucking problem is. It's just a dog. And it's like, just a fucking dog. Honestly, people who think that way have no compassion for anything. Anyone who ever says to you, well, it's just a cat, or it's just a dog, or it's just a whatever. Let me tell you this, right? Those pets depend on you and give you unconditional love completely. Even if they're shitbags. Lily's a nightmare, right? But I love her so much. If she dies, I'm going to be crucified again, right? And I have said that I'm not going to get any more dogs after that because I don't think I can cope. You know, but grief is real for pets and animals and creatures, yeah, especially ones that have helped you. So before you say, it's just a dog I don't understand, and have a look at yourself and see if you've got a soul. Cheers.
And the thing is with pets, you always know it's going to come, don't you?
Yeah.
I mean, obviously people do lose children, and that's horrendous. But you expect to lose your parents. You expect to lose older relatives. You expect to lose your peers. But yeah, losing an animal is just.
It's horrendous because it's a different. It's not like you can have a fucking funeral either, you know. I mean, some people do, but I mean, my wife's a veterinary nurse, and one day I said, well, what happened to Skylar then? She said she got put in a bag and then was incinerated with probably a whole lot of other dogs.
Yeah.
And you just think, oh shit. And then I got a rush of guilt because I didn't, build a mausoleum and put it, and it's like, oh, shut up. But grief is very strange in this fact that it's not about the humanity, it's about loss.
Yeah.
So whatever it is, also loss of self, you can grieve for yourself. I know a friend of mine who's wasn't disabled, was in the army, was a sharpshooter in the army, Bisley shooting things, right? And was in 3 para, so he was hard as fuck, could shoot in a straight line, not someone you want to meet in the dark night, but was a lovely guy. Yep. He had a motorcycle crash, smashed his pelvis, smashed the bottom of his spine, loss of all movement from below the waist. He went through a grieving period for his legs, and he says that. Yeah. He went through a period of my life's over, it's all gone. Now he's bloody parachuting and doing all that because he goes, well, I'm a para, and I've got to jump out of a plane. And I'm like,
obviously,
yeah, of course you have, mate. You think he's not the sharpest tool in the box as well because he plays up to the paratrooper thing. He got a master's degree in the army about airflow science, something to do with that. This guy's not stupid, right? And they were doing tests on an exoskeleton thing in America. He was asked to go and do that because he's military and he's still in theory part of that. And then he put him in this electric shock suit which shocks your nerves to make you walk and all that. I don't know if I should have said that out loud. Am I allowed to speak? I don't care. So look, grief. How does your grief manifest for you now?
I guess the stereotypical out of nowhere, something happens, burst into tears.
Do you think it's a memory link?
Yeah.
You have a conscious click?
Yeah.
And then that's it. I'll be honest with you, and this will make me sound like a terrible human being, but I've forgotten who my mother was, apart from she was there for me. Yeah. And she was my mother. She brought us up and she fought for us kids. But I found out something about her later on, about her relationship with my dad, and something happened that should detract from that. And I'm not going to go into the details, but it really doesn't, because my overall experience of childhood from my family is a positive thing. Yeah. Apart from when I told my parents at 16 that I smoked, and no one gave a shit. My dad was reading a big Times newspaper, right, as he always did, and he was like that. And I walked in and I was like hedging about, because I'd just been busted at school for smoking. Yeah. And my mother was in the corner stroking her cat like some evil Bond villain. And then my dad, he didn't put his paper down because I think he knew what was coming, because he worked at the school. Yeah. And I walked in and I said, right, look, there's something you should know. And he went, oh, is it that you smoke? And I'm like, My exact words were, "You fucking what?" He said, "I wasn't born yesterday." He said, "If you get in trouble at school, I can't bail you out." And I said, "Well, I'm just about to get in trouble." He says, "Oh, I know." But I didn't give a shit. I mean, the weirdest thing was, all these people were smoking behind the theatre, right? Yeah. And I'm smoking Marlboro Red, because I always did. Obviously. And I'm standing there, and the chemistry teacher comes around the corner, right? I won't say his name. And he went, "Oh, thank fuck, can I buy him a cigarette?" And I'm like, yeah, here you go.
I was about to say that. Yeah. I was joking, but it actually happened.
Right, he was cool, because he knew me. Yeah. And then, I'll say this man's name, Jim Pullen his name was. He was another chaplain. Didn't like us, because my dad was the chaplain. He was just... And then he came round and busted me smoking, and I carried on smoking while he was shouting at me. And I was looking at him, and I realised then that teachers actually don't have a lot of power and all of that. So, you know, that childhood experience wasn't a nightmare. It wasn't, you know, obviously I built it up to be the things. I never communicated my drug taking to my mother, and I blocked my family out completely when it all went tits up. Yeah. But, you know, the grief I think that I might have is the fact that I don't have that kind of support from her anymore. Yeah. My dad's still there, and he listens to me on the phone. He called me last night. Yeah, that's the thing that I miss, I guess, is just being out of terms with them. I mean, they were both... My mum was considerably older than my dad. There was like 14 years difference between them. But yeah, I miss having that person to turn to. And as I say, with then expecting then to have Sally to turn to as the kind of family elder, and not having her either. There's a big vacuum, right?
Yeah. I mean, when my mum passed away, somebody said, not in a nasty way, "Well, you're an orphan now." And that hit pretty hard.
I think I'd have punched him straight in the face, whether it meant it or not.
It was a second-hand comment. It wasn't said directly to me.
That's lucky.
Which it probably was lucky. Yeah. But that's, something you don't really need to be reminded of, I guess.
Yeah, thanks for that.
But that's it. Christ, now I've got to be a grown-up. People say you become a grown-up when you become a parent or whatever, and I'm not sure I ever did. But I think not having an older generation to turn to, and then going, right, well, it's all on me now.
We are the older generation.
That's the time when you, right, okay, I have to be the grown-up now, because I haven't got people to ask. You know?
The thing is, what is being a grown-up? That's the thing. I have no idea. I mean, I'm not financially secure. I don't have a house. I've got a child and a wife. I mean, does that make me a grown-up? I have no idea, and I don't really care. I don't dwell. That's not something I dwell on. I think it depends on the bond you have with people when they die. Yeah. I think Henrietta, my middle sister, I think she was the one that was hit the hardest by my mother's death. Yeah. Obviously, I'm not going to speak for her, but I think I, as a human being, will just stand on that until I'm ready to look at it, and then when I'm ready to look at it, then I fell apart. Yeah. And I think grief should be allowed out. Yeah. Because from personal experience, if you don't let your grief out, if you don't have an outlet for your grief, vocalization, I know that's my go-to for everything.
Yeah, well, it is.
But if you, I was talking to my wife the other day about, you know, making sure that if you have an angst or a feeling or some negativity or even anger, get it out of you. Yeah. Because if it's outside and you can hold it up and look at it, then you can bring some rationality into the game. Yeah. If it's internalised, you ruminate. So the worst situation goes round. I'm sure it has to be the same with grief, does it not?
Yeah. And there's a comment I heard the other day, and I think I've said it to you, but I don't think I've said it on the pod, so I think it's important to say it now. I heard someone say recently, vocalising stuff, the reason for vocalising stuff is you don't understand your thoughts, but you do understand what you hear. Right. And I've taken that a step further to say, okay, well, if you're vocalising something, rather than having that thought in your head, you're going to process it differently. I'm not a psychotherapist, I don't know if that's true, but when somebody said that statement, you don't understand your thoughts, but you do understand what you hear. Yeah. That's led me to sort of go, perhaps that's why. So that might be a little bit of a thing. And I've always thought when we talk about talking and recommend talking, another thing I've always wanted to say and never said it is the benefit of talking isn't necessarily that you're going to get, in most cases I think very much isn't, that you're necessarily going to get advice back from talking. It is just that physical process of talking about something just somehow helps you process it better.
Yep.
So yeah, we always talk about listening, we always talk about talking, but there are 2 points that I think sort of take that statement a little bit further.
Yeah.
To make it a bit more tangible, sort of thing.
I think it's important to give yourself the brain space by letting this shit out.
Yeah.
And I think that's very valid. You know, I often, if I'm asked for advice quite often, and I don't know why, right? But my advice to anyone, if you've watched the show with Perry about reforming after prison, he said to me something that jarred me, because I do it. He said, I pray every day.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what? And he said, I'm not religious. I've got a cross in my desk drawer at work, but I'm not a religious man. But every day I put my feelings out into the air. And I said, Jesus, I thought I was the only one that did that. Mm-hmm. Mentioned Jesus, you know.
Yeah.
But
just telling him.
Yeah. But I do that because I don't feel the need to burden somebody else, rightly or wrongly, with my problems, unless I'm looking for a solution.
Yeah.
Now, therapists will tell you, they're not going to give you a solution.
Absolutely not.
They are going to guide you to the solutions you already have in yourself.
Yep.
Right? Because every human being is capable of solving their own problems when they get out of their own way.
Yep.
So, you know, I sent a message to our group chat last night saying, look, I'm you know, eating the wrong things. It's all gone wrong. I need help.
Yep.
That's kind of a thing. I've never really asked for help for anyone, so that's very telling. But the reason I mention it is that if I can ask for help, which I did with my mental health with sertraline and all that, which may not be the best move, but also, you know, I've found a way to ask for help. But every day I will when I'm on my own, I will vocalise what my problems are, because they get them out of my head, and I don't have this negative rolling ticker tape inside my brain.
You actually say it out loud.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Formulate a sentence, put it out into the world.
Yep.
Doesn't have to be a lot.
Yep.
And I'm telling you, it helps.
Yeah.
And if you believe in God, fantastic. Because having a faith gives you a crutch. It gives you something to lean on. My mother had you know, religion to help her through her disease. I don't necessarily believe in God in a structured sense, i.e. I don't need a church to get my feelings out. Yeah. And at the end of the day, prayers, you're asking an other for help. So if you're praying to something, or you're just speaking out loud about your feelings to the air, that's the same thing. Yeah. So don't be worried by the word prayer. Just look at how you're feeling and say it out loud.
Yep.
Now, if you've got somebody to talk to as well, someone who isn't going to give you a solution. Yep. So if you're talking to Jerry down the road, who's a know-it-all, he'll go, yeah, well, when I happened, blah, blah. It spins it back onto them. That's what happens. When somebody's talking to you about their problems, they don't need you to relate verbally. They need you to listen and just take it in. And then maybe at the end say, look, is there anything I can do for you? Yeah. Do you want to, you know, if you ever want to talk to me, but mean it. There are loads of people in this world who will say to you, oh, if you need me, I'm just here. And then you phone and the phone rings and nobody ever answers. Right? I don't rely on other human beings mostly, right? But I have to rely on something, so I rely on myself to vocalise out what's going on. Yeah. Doesn't always find a solution, but it does stop me ruminating, which I think is important. Yeah. Right. Anything else you need to say? Because the producer man is waving at me with a clock.
Yeah, no, I think that's it.
I think I'd like to say one more thing. Grief is something, sadly, you will deal with in your life, and you will have to look at how it makes you feel. Try not to beat yourself up if you don't react straight away. You don't necessarily burst into tears when somebody dies, be it close to you or anything. Your brain needs time to see how you feel about it. But don't be afraid to talk about how you feel, either out into the world or to someone else, or somebody who will listen to you without judgment, because it's important. If you could like and subscribe our channel and tell your friends if you value what we're doing, because it's important to Lee and I that you guys enjoy what we do. Starting in the next show, we've got loads of comments and stuff. We're going to put that into the show so we can react and interact with you. So if you have feelings about what we do, comment down below, put it in the doobly-doo. And then, you know, we all know that if you're struggling, maybe we can talk about that. If you're supporting us, we can definitely talk about that. You know, whatever you want to say about what we're doing, vocalise it in written form in the comments below. 15 Coping. Goodbye.